Hey everyone, welcome back. This is part 2 of a 2-part series reviewing Star Wars Visions. So make sure if you've not seen part 1, go to the description. The link's there, then come back to this one. Otherwise, sit back and enjoy. Here's part 2. What would be one of the ones that left you the most kind of just...
Tatooine Rhapsody.
Oh my goodness. Let's talk about this one.
Yeah, okay, let's really go into that one.
And shout out to our boy Jared, who loves this one.
Oh,
So
really?
It has its fans. It has its fans. So yeah.
Okay, I'll start with defending it in one aspect, okay? Just as from an anime fan, I know where they were going with this. It didn't leave me in the sense of being like, what is happening? I knew exactly what the studio wanted to go with. This would tend to lean more, especially towards like a younger audience. The style definitely resembled, and I know you guys won't be familiar with this, but I'm gonna mention it, this anime called Made in Abyss. And just to briefly catch you guys up on it, it's the style of animation that everyone in the show looks very childlike. Right? They're all small and kind of cute looking, but the story starts off very sweet and innocent too. But as the story progresses, it goes dark and messed up. And you're just like, what is happening? This is not for kids at all. I feel like the style that they were going for was something like that, minus the darkness that I just kind of went down. And now I want to know how you guys felt from that when you saw that.
Yeah, it was one of those where Visions was something I was looking forward to, because I've always appreciated the artistry of anime and manga, and so I was like, this is cool. And then like my daughter being like Star Wars super fan now, I was like, this is something we can watch together. But that one hit, and it was just so out there that I was like, shoot, I think I need to take a break. it kind of took me out. Like, I think if this one was maybe the 7th episode or 6th episode, it would have kept the momentum going maybe a bit better, because you've seen a bunch of ones that will have some of those traditional Star Wars appeals, and then you get to this one where it's this band has basically got a reprieve from Jabba the Hutt because they rock out so hard, which is cool. But yeah, it was a tough one for me to get into. And then at the time I was just like, wow, if we have a couple more like this, I don't know that I'm gonna want to invest the time type of thing. But that was probably the one for me. I appreciated the look of it, but just the story and what it was a bridge too far.
Yeah, I'm pretty much there with that one too. This one actually had me quite worried for the rest of the episodes as well, because I had gone in my head, okay, this is going to be hit, miss, right? And I got to that episode and I stopped watching Star Wars Visions up until recently. And I just finished it so that we could have a great conversation here, to be honest with you. But I kept waiting for every episode to be pulled out in the same way that I was with that episode. And look, I get that not every single thing in Star Wars or in general is going to be made for every audience. This one wasn't for me, and that's cool. And I'm not going to revisit it. I'm never going to watch it again. But if it is for a more younger or juvenile crowd, I can appreciate that. If people like it, that's cool too. Like, if that's your thing, it's just not for me. And there's 8 episodes that I liked out of the 9, and that's a pretty good batting average.
I agree with you. Like, this is by far my least favorite episode. I'm just gonna give it like a tiny bit of credit from the stance of everything Star Wars is always following like some kind of cool story arc, right? You've got The Mandalorian, you've got Jedi, Sith, etc. They're always following somebody super cool and relevant, right? This is like that one story. You're like, what if we just followed like a random band that just happens to be in the Star Wars world?
Yeah, you know what? I got to give them props for that, for just taking the shot.
Well, for sure. And it's really the only one, when you step back and look, that doesn't deal with the Force, Jedi, lightsabers, kyber crystals, I believe. In all of them have that common theme, except for this one. And that would be the only thing I stepped back and looked at the end of it and said, okay, this one didn't land for me. But maybe it would have been cool to see this style apply to something that wasn't Jedi, that wasn't a lightsaber or something to that effect, the Force. It was, let's go out and see a bounty hunter or see some other aspect of Star Wars that is quote unquote familiar, but it's not Jedi related. They lean really heavily into that, which is okay. And that might come down to the storytelling and the need to have a villain or an antagonist and a protagonist and a very clear split and economic storytelling. But yeah, we didn't see a lot of other Star Wars, if you know what I mean.
The fact that it falls to episode 2, there's really like no good spot to put this episode. No matter where it goes, you're going to go 4 or 5 episodes in, and then this hits and you're just like, oh, what just happened? Every other episode has a similar tone, right? In what it's trying to tell a story. This is the one that just completely goes off the rails in a completely different direction. And the fact that it falls at number 2, especially after episode 1 was so grounded, even if this, anime thing's not really my thing, this is kind of cool. And then you just go into episode 2 and I can see exactly like how that happened for you, Tim. We're just, what it almost fits a lot of those stereotypes and things that some people think anime kind of falls into, all that genre. It's like that's what episode 2 is. And I think for casual people or people who don't watch anime, they're gonna have that same problem. They'll go to episode 2 and be like, oh, okay, I'm out. Yeah.
When I think like Carlos said, placement of this one is probably incorrect. Like a 4 or 5 or a 6, maybe even a little later. Like you don't want to end on that note, I don't think, but you get it, you build up enough goodwill with an audience that you can give that one a pass and say, okay, there's probably hopefully something better on the other side. But you've already made it through 6 of the 9 episodes. You've gotten to that point, you're like, okay, I'm into this, I'm digging it, I'm running through these pretty quick, and oh, okay, that's a little weird, but let's see what's next. And so yeah, having this as episode 2, it definitely ground me to a complete halt. I was like, okay. 1 was awesome. 2, I'm gonna take a break, and then I just never got back to it until recently.
I almost just wish that episode didn't exist. I'm sure it has its, you mentioned someone who actually likes it, so I guess it's got its place. And I'm actually now more curious to see people here in the West versus like maybe people in Japan and how they feel about it. I wonder if just more people here just don't fall into that style versus maybe there's a bigger audience for it in Japan.
So on that point, like as far as like the larger anime community, how was Star Wars Visions received?
To be honest with you, I don't even really know. Like I did see a couple of reviews about it and people seemed really excited and they kind of like the idea that it bridged it together to kind of bring fans from both sides. But I don't think there's just that many fans in general really covering it. So I almost feel that this might have been more Star Wars fans checking it out more than anime fans checking Star Wars out.
Yeah, that is kind of the sense I got.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, most of the people from the community that I know all watch this. And from what I know, most of them don't consistently, at least, digest anime or manga. That you might have had a lot of people stepping over into from Star Wars into this world a little bit.
Honestly, even more reason why I wanted to do this video, because there just doesn't seem to be a lot about it. Like even just other people, I'm like, have you checked this out? They're like, no, not really. Some have never even heard of it. They're totally disconnected from Marvel and Disney in general. It'll be interesting. I'm hoping that maybe a video like this will get more of those people to check it out because it's got what they like. So if you're definitely like an anime action junkie, then you're going to be right in this world and like it. And even if you don't know really anything about Star Wars, I think it gives you just enough and it's simplistic enough. Just like you said, you've got good guys, you got bad guys, and then you go at it. And some of these episodes, like we were talking about episode 8, is just like, how did they... I felt like I watched a whole season of a show in 15 minutes. I don't understand. It is kind of shocking in that sense. To be honest with you, my impression was anime fans would flock to this more than Star Wars fans, but completely wrong.
I'll be very curious to see what the reception was like and kind of the type of views that they got and if they're getting traditional fans of Star Wars or traditional fans of anime or both or neither.
It'd be interesting too from the anime side because even if you don't like Star Wars, like you're saying, Chris, there, I think this is a pretty low barrier for entry style of storytelling. Like for me, the hardest part is getting into the animation style. But I'm a Star Wars fan, so I understand kind of the basics, and there's little hints and nods more around like droids and some of the quote unquote set dressings that you're like, okay, I feel like I'm in the world and all that. And you see black masks and you're like, okay, bad guy. And it'd be interesting to see if people felt that same connection to the stories that we did that are unfamiliar with Star Wars. Because is that because we are familiar and they are thriving and living in this familiar space, but also going out and beyond that?
Yeah, the credit that I'd give it is that there's very few things that link to conventional Star Wars continuity and very few things that you need some kind of backstory to understand. Like honestly, Tatooine Rhapsody one is the only one that kind of draws on existing lore, the position that Jabba has. But if you walk into that one blind, you're like, oh, this guy's like the big boss, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And off you go. But the rest of them, they were almost just short stories that happened to have some of those Star Wars trappings in them, that instead of this being a samurai or a knight, it's a Jedi. Yeah. No, I think like Tim said, the barrier for entry is pretty low. If the continuity of it all is something that's keeping you away, I'd definitely say that that's not something that's even remotely an issue with this.
That's almost the best part about this, right? And when it comes down to like how they've constructed the stories, is they haven't worried about canon, which is nice. They haven't worried about tying this into a grander story or making sure that it doesn't conflict with like a Vader or a Luke Skywalker story, right? They've kind of unshackled the creatives and let them just tell a story. right? They don't worry about that. Oh, there was no Jedi in the universe between this point and this point, or there's a whole bunch, or these aren't Inquisitors or Vader hunting Jedis. This is some other like acolyte. They just really didn't worry about that, and so you can call them Elseworld stories in Star Wars or what ifs. Doesn't matter, but it doesn't worry about the canon and the history. It just tells you a story, and that might also really help it too.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess like just more from a casual Star Wars fan, I think the one thing I do notice is just that deep connection that people get so worried about going from one movie to the next or a TV show is like, where does this line up? It seems to be incredibly important to Star Wars fans.
Yeah. Oh, like even me a little more connected to it. I'm kind of like you, Chris, where it's almost a bit foreign because it's just like you're putting so many shackles on the stories you could tell because you need it to fit into this small piece, right? And like there's people worried about the fact that Obi-Wan and Vader had a conversation on the Death Star in 1977, and is the new show going to line up? It's like, who cares, man? Character over continuity. That's like, we need a t-shirt of that.
The ability to retcon is real.
Like, who cares? Like, somebody wrote something in 1977, and that's the way they told the story. Tell a good story in 2021, and people will be just as happy with it. And if it keeps 4 people up at night, so be it.
We have this constraint put on us now, though, that especially because of the MCU in particular and Marvel, that every story matters and every story builds into this grander thing. And Star Wars has tried to pick that up, where every little thing matters and something connects, right? They literally built a movie in Rogue One out of the crawl of Episode 4. Like they put a movie in this tiny little space to explain this one little line or 2 little lines in a whole thing, and it had to have all this relevance and connection, all that. And I absolutely love Rogue One and how it ties, and I love how these universes meld and they have this through-going narrative and this grander vision and all that. But I can appreciate what Carlos is saying, that sometimes that really weighs down a film, and in some cases it completely pulls it apart because you're weighed down by expectations of continuity and trying to build something bigger in while ignoring the characters that are supposed to be carrying the story.
Well, and I find like sometimes the fans can be just so beholden to that they start resenting the product, or like, and it becomes product, right? Like you lose the art. And that's kind of the thing that I really loved about Star Wars Vision, is there was an artistry to it, and just so many things that you get in that space is like, this is the product, right? Like we can sell XYZ, so let's build this around it type of thing, right? Whereas this was just these studios plying their craft to the best of their ability, and off you go.
Well, and like in Lucasfilm, there's a group, the story group, that controls and monitors every piece of content to make sure it's fitting into the big puzzle, that it's consistent, and it's going to have to step on each other eventually because there's just too much of it, right? When you've got 400 books and comic books that run for hundreds of issues, and then you've got these big pillar movies, and then now you're trying to push shows in between, like you said, like Obi-Wan coming up here, you know, you're going to have to step on some of this stuff to make sure that you're telling a good story, because all these comic books and shows and all that, they want to tell those big stories. Obi-Wan versus Maul, you know, the first time that Luke shows up post Return of the Jedi, you know, like they want those moments, but at times that's going to have to come at the expense of the comic book that told the story right after Return of the Jedi. You know what I mean?
I don't know the connections well enough, but I just know for me, if Obi-Wan's coming, I need to see Obi-Wan fight Darth Vader. And I have no idea if that makes any sense. I don't care.
Exactly. But that's the way that it should be approached, at least to some extent, right? But
yeah,
there is some thought that it's like, no, this should not happen ever because it runs contrary to this over here.
Yeah.
It's like, where do you draw the line? And that might just be the difference between Eastern and Western storytelling, where like you look at weekly comic books that go on forever, and once again there's this insistence that it fit into this continuity, and you have these characters that never age and never leave high school or move out of the manor type of thing. But then with manga, they're not afraid to take the most popular selling book on the shelf and just finish that story, because that's the artist's vision and that's his arc for those characters.
Yeah.
And you know, you flash forward to today, and it's like not even close at how much more popular and how sought after the manga books are over the things put out by the American publishers. Like, it's insane. Like, I'll spend hours and hours and hours with in a couple of the stores in the city just because buddies with the owners. And for every 2 people that come in and ask for this or that graphic novel from Marvel, there's like literally 8 or 9 that are on the phone or showing up in the store trying to buy manga books. So there's something to be said, right? And now those niche Japanese books are the hottest things on the market right now. The other thing that I like as a comic guy is that people are buying those to read, and they're not buying them to collect or anything like that. They're just seeking these things out because they know that there's a great story in there type of thing. So
it's cool that you bring up that point, and to bring it back to Stora's visions a little bit and talking about how they constructed the stories to have a start, middle, and finish, right? And specifically putting that point to finish is that most, I'd say, Western TV shows and films and franchises in general are really bled to death almost, right? Where you need to get, like, Walking Dead's a great example of that, where they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. Lost is another one of that, right? Where they just kept pushing the seasons, where there's a logical end to these things, but the demand for the show and the demand for the revenue from the show exceeds the story and the importance of ending it on a note where it makes sense. And then you end up where I often say characters become caricatures of themselves, where they're so far removed from their original genesis and how they are either in the books or how they originally set up, that they're almost unrecognizable at times. And that's just because the shows aren't meant to go 10 seasons. You know what I mean? That's a lot of storytelling once a week for 45 minutes. And that's what envisions here. You know, we've talked about and celebrated a bit here the fact that these were economic, they were emotional, but also most of them had like reasonable conclusions where this is an end.
He couldn't win against the weakness that comes with age. No matter how powerful you become, no, it will not last forever.
Like the message at the end of that about power and responsibility, and power wanes over time and power isn't absolute. Like that's a really cool message that they gave to us in 15 minutes, right? My power is waning, you will grow to become more powerful than me, and his acknowledgement that power isn't absolute, isn't infinite. I thought that was such a cool thing, and here we are 15 minutes, and they're able to tell this really cool story and have that as the message at the end.
Just as we age, we keep seeking these things that we want, and it can be relevant to anything, right? Like it just be, you want to get a better job, you want to make more money, you want to get a bigger house, but at some point it all ends, right? So it's like you're seeking this your whole life, but then it just all dwindles away from you. And I think that's just such a great point where it's like kind of just makes you think about more living in the moment and not always worrying about tomorrow. Everyone's so obsessed with just the future and not like living now. And I think that just brings that message. It's just, and they did that in 15 minutes. Yeah. It's like,
with a pretty cool lightsaber battle in the middle of it. So I got a question for you, for you and Carlos, but mostly you, Chris, here, just about the visual presentation of some of this. I noticed that a lot of the animation I've watched before, there's a tendency to always have movement on the screen. You know, whether it's in the background, foreground, wherever the character, they're always moving, very fluid, like almost like real life, right? Where there's something always going on. I find that they use a lot of still visualization in most of these, where you'll frame up and they'll almost do like a Ken Burns, you know, from iMovie, where it's like you have a still image, but you move across that image to give the perception of movement, but everything in the image is still. And I found that jumping out to me about how powerful that is sometimes, in just the stillness of a shot and remaining there with no movement in the foreground, background, anything. And I was trying to think, like, is this something that is embedded more in anime, or am I just so hyper focused on the visuals that I'm actually not equating kind of more of like your Pixar stuff? Like there's always something moving on the screen. Here, that's not the case, right?
There's a lot of studios that do that kind of stuff, but I think like the perpetual motion type of thing, it's a very much like a Pixar Disney type trope, right? So I know like the Batman the animated series, like that was one of its stock and trades, was that it had all those static backgrounds all the time, right? And then you just have Batman popping up wherever, and very rarely did they have perpetual motion all over the place. So Warner Brothers animation has kind of gone back to that style a little bit with a few of their things, like with Mortal Kombat, and to be honest, I think part of the reason is that it's cheaper to do it that way, with the completely still backgrounds and then just a few hand-drawn things in the front. But Yeah.
I like the style of it. Like, it was really noticeable to me, but in certain elements of it, right? Or you've got like a very still background and two characters just slowly moving towards each other. I think there is power in presenting it that way.
Yeah. Well, I know it lets you like kind of marinate in the moment, right? So
Yeah, it pretty much covers kind of what both of you said. It's definitely, in some instances, it's cost. So, especially like the level of detail that some of these anime have, in order to be able to have like that much style while being animated is very costly, right? You need a lot of people to be able to do that 2D animation. Some ways to cut corners is to do exactly what you just described, kind of doing that Ken Burns panning, right? But then you can kind of stylize it a little bit to give it a little bit more dynamic. Other times it is purposeful, and it's the way that they want to kind of like, they tend to do a lot of like really close ups, right? Like really close up on the eyes, and then they'll tend to put a lot of detail into that because it's more still, so it's easier to do that. For something like Pixar is more 3D animation, so it's easier to be able to just constantly have things moving all the time. Because once you have it all set up, it's kind of doing its own thing, and then you're just telling the characters what to do. Where in anime or animation, literally somebody has to draw every single one of those frames. So yeah, sometimes it can be more fluid, it can be less fluid. It definitely depends the studio, and but yeah, it's definitely something you would notice more in anime. In
yeah. And to your point too about that zoom on the eye, I think it was in Lapin Ocho as well when he's presenting her with the lightsaber. It's like zoomed in on her eye, and then you can see like the iris, like everything. You see almost like a galaxy starting to spin inside of it. I was like, whoa, that is a cool piece of detail that, you know, if you're not exactly paying attention to it, you may not catch it. But when I caught it, I was like, holy, that's a cool piece there.
That's definitely very anime too. So in terms of like, they'll give the characters some kind of power up, right? And it usually will somehow come from the eyes, like their eyes will change some way. The hair will change some way. Dragon Ball is a great example. Or they'll get something that will physically change them, so that way they can sell more toys. That way,
yeah, it's like getting a different Boba Fett armor or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much the main reason. It's the higher ups coming in. We need a new design. So that's how that works.
The other thing I wanted to ask you guys too, if you caught this or this stuck out to you, is the sound design on this. I thought it was freaking phenomenal. Like, there's a lot of very familiar sounds from Star Wars. We've talked about being familiar and all that, whether it's speeders or lightsabers, or even just some like little moments of droid movements and droid sounds and all that. But that's another thing that really stuck out to me here was the sound design of almost every episode. I always liked the sound design and the score and all that to almost play a character, right? Because it draws on emotions, and I thought that was a huge standout for me. Like I said, in almost every episode.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with like Star Wars music in general, other than like that main theme.
Yeah.
Actually, now that I think about it, did like the main theme?
No,
play?
there's not a lot of score that like Star Wars score, if any.
Okay.
There might be a few notes, maybe. It's more like the actual sounds, like I said, lightsabers and droid movements and ships and speeders zooming off, these type of things that the design of that was, I think, quite particular.
Yeah, they did a good job of having it familiar, but also making it unique as well. Like it was just slightly different, so that you knew that it was married to this particular offering, as opposed to kind of the standard stock sounds and whatnot. So I thought that was a cool little piece of detail that they had to these.
If they told you tomorrow they're gonna make a season 2, would you guys be on board for it? Are you more sold on the idea, or are you more like, if this is it, I'm good?
Yeah, I'd be game. Like, once I got to the end of, like, I'm always game for anything, right? Like, if you're gonna tell a story, sure, I'll check it out, and I'll let you know on the other side of it whether or not I liked it, type of thing. So yeah, and I do think that the creativity is really needed in this Western storytelling space. And yeah, like I applaud Disney for pursuing this thing, because, you know, like Tim said, like, you have the Pixar animation thing, but it encompasses everything, and everything that you've done is kind of in this samey type of spot, and that's like, so many of their things are kind of feel manufactured like that. So something like this is just fresh and unique, and maybe it inspires somebody to want to do something different and kind of break down those walls a little bit, or maybe say, hey, you know that comic book that 1,500 people read? Maybe we don't need to be beholden to that, and we can tell this cool story. So yeah, I'm there for it, man. Like anytime anybody can flex their muscles creatively, I say bring it. And yeah, not everything is gonna work, but I think that's the whole beauty of art, right? So these things are either arts or they're products. So
Yeah.
give me the art.
Well put. Yeah, I'm game for season 2. I will be upfront and honest. It's not going to be a day one watch, but I think I'm into the concepts, and to echo some of the stuff that Carlos said there about the creativity inside of this and the ability to tell unique stories, I think is important. And what I'd like to see them do, to be honest with you, a couple original stories, couple continuations from this. I still want the originality in there, but it would be cool if they picked up on the twins or Lop and Ocho and told like the next part of that story and had some narrative threads that connected. But I also like that they went to, 7 different studios and said, let's get a full offering for this. I don't want them to veer away from that and kind of go into one specific thing. Maybe that plus, okay, we're going to tell a broader story, but I'd be interested for sure to see this come back to Disney Plus. And Disney Plus, the way it's going, like they're looking for content fast and furious. So it would not surprise me if the second season of this lands.
And that'll be interesting too, because that to me seems like the natural. It's been years now, but I've been waiting for studios to really like realize there is a world of IP out there that is incredibly popular that nobody here seems to be picking them up. Netflix is just starting to, I think, catch wind of like, oh, we have all these things that we could be making into like live action and all that good stuff. And you have like all these studios fighting over for Star Wars or Marvel or DC. And you're looking like Netflix or Amazon looking for that next big IP to be able to have that same level of like fans that will come in and watch their stuff. It's just kind of blowing my mind. It's just starting. Like now they've got Cowboy Bebop coming to Netflix.
And are they doing like Death Note again? Taking another stab?
Yes,
at
they're
that,
taking another stab to that because that other one was awful. And yeah, and that's another thing, especially with anime fans, they've just been burned so many times. Like Dragon Ball, they tried, it failed miserably.
Guyver was another one back in the day.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just been awful. Like it's the same growing pains that Marvel and DC had, right at the beginning, where just the people who were making it had no respect for the source material, had no idea, didn't care. They're just like, just crank it out, get it over with. Like, let's just make some money, right? And absolutely no idea what it is that they were even getting themselves into, and still are kind of having that same dilemma. It's starting to look like it's changing though. Like it seems like they're realizing if we took this seriously, there's a lot of money to be made.
Well, and they're going the opposite way too, because like Netflix did that Witcher Nightmare of the Wolf, and that was one of the coolest things I've ever seen, like anime wise, or even just in the Witcher space. Like I don't know if you've checked that one out, but it was rad. It looked so cool, and it was a great story. And 5 years ago, you would have never had them be like, oh, let's make an anime prequel to this series that we're doing.
Yeah, that exactly that. And I think Netflix is definitely one of the ones that are going to probably try to grab up as much as they can now that they're kind of getting into that space. But I'm actually surprised that Disney's not trying to love Marvel, love Star Wars, but it's like they need more, just anything else. They got that covered. Like, there's no one else who can cover that. They really need to just get other products, serious stuff, dramas, anything, right? They just need to really round out that library. I think that's definitely one way to go and grab some big IPs along the way.
I love it. More, just bring it on. Bring it all on.
So, all right, guys, I think that kind of just wraps it up. I think we went in depth on exactly why people should probably check out Star Wars Visions, or I guess some people might take a look and think maybe not. I don't know.
You've got me into a season 2, so you've already got one in the win column for the anime style of Star Wars. So you're good, man. You got one.
Yeah. By the end of this, we have one view on the video. It's like, all right, I got 2. That's all we needed.
No, man, this has been a lot of fun. We really appreciate you inviting us over here into your world, and we'll for sure reciprocate that and have you over on the podcast at some point in time here, just to talk about anything, man. It's we got a full offering over there, so it's been an absolute pleasure. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us.
Yeah, had a lot of fun too, and I hope everyone watching enjoys that little intro that we had. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Hey everyone, so that was the full review of Star Wars Visions. I had a blast doing this with the guys from the Nerd Room. I can't wait to do further collaborations with them in the future. And I want to know, what did you think of Star Wars Visions? Did you like it? Are you considering to check it out now? Let me know in the comments. So if you've enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. Hitting that like button is a huge help to me. And don't forget to hit the bell to be notified when I drop my next video. So this video was a lot of work to finish, but I had a blast doing it. And that's it for this one. I'll see you in the next video.